Willin swallowed hard. Prince Rupert choked, and even Morwen looked slightly startled. Stephen just showed up. The only question is, what's the best way of doing it? Mendenbar continued. Any suggestions? Well, we can't just charge in and attack the cave, Cimmerian said, frowning. The wizards could kill Kazul before we got to her. And if the area around the cave looks like that bit you showed us a few minutes ago, it simply wouldn't be possible to sneak up on them. What we need is a back way in, Telemaine said. I don't suppose there is one. Every cave in the Enchanted Forest has a back way in, Mendenbar said. The problem is finding it. Do you know anything about that part of the forest, Morwen? I'm afraid not, Morwen said. She turned to the cats. Chaos? Jasper? What about you? The cats looked at each other, blinked, and looked back at Morwen. They aren't familiar with the area either, Morwen said. Willin coughed. If I may venture a suggestion, Your Majesty. Go ahead. I believe there's a list of caves, passages, vestibules, and entrances in the royal archives, said the elf. Would you like me to get it so you can examine it? Immediately, Mendenbar replied. I might have known that you'd have a list somewhere with the right information, Willin. I should have asked you at once. The elf bowed deeply, looking very pleased. I shall bring it without delay, Your Majesty, he said, and whisked off down the corridor. Hey, cried Crown Prince Jerillum. Are you going to fight the wizards? Can I come? Yes, we are, and no, you can't, Mendenbar told him. You're going to be locked in the dungeon, remember? But fighting the wizards is so much more interesting than being locked in a dungeon, Jerillum complained. I want to watch. Maybe so, Cimmerian said, but that's how it is with dungeons. You aren't supposed to get a choice about whether you're going to be locked in one or not. This was evidently a new idea for the young prince, and he didn't look happy about it. But nothing, Mendenbar said. I'm the king, and I say that you will go to the dungeon instead of fighting the wizards. No argument. Yes, said Morwen, we have much more important things to argue about, such as how to get rid of these wizards once we find them. Buckets, said Cimmerian. Lots of buckets and soap and lemon juice. Where do you keep your buckets, Mendenbar? Around somewhere, Mendenbar said vaguely. I'll have someone get us a few. Can the three of us carry enough buckets to get rid of all the wizards? 4 of us, said Morwen. The cats yowled. Yes, I know, and of course you're coming, but you can't carry a bucket of soapy water, so for purposes of this discussion it doesn't matter, she told the cats. The cats gave her an affronted look, turned their backs, and began making indignant little noises to each other. It seems probable that the wizards will be present in force, Telemaine said. They were certainly aware of the Prince Rupert's appearance among them this morning. They may well have detected your unsuccessful locating spell, Mendenbar. Consequently, I would put a wager that there are far too many to dispose of by means of your, interesting methods, Princess Cimmerian. Well, we'll bring some buckets along anyway, Mendenbar said. It can't hurt. He nodded a summons to the blank-faced footman by the front door. The footman came over at once, and Mendenbar told him to bring half a dozen buckets of soapy water, mixed with lemon juice, out to the entrance hall immediately. The footman, who had worked at the palace for a long time and was very used to peculiar requests, bowed impassively and departed. Any other ideas? Mendenbar asked. Can't the witch turn them into toads? Said the Crown Prince. I certainly don't object trying, Morwen said. Cimmerian shook her head. I don't think it would work. The Society of Wizards has some new spell that soaks up magic. That's what makes the bare spots in the Enchanted Forest. Still wish I understood why the Society of Wizards are doing this, Mendenbar said, half to himself. I suppose it makes sense to try to blame the dragons for burning bits of the Enchanted Forest, but they've been deliberately trying to start a war. That would make almost as much trouble for them as everyone else. Ah, well, but would it? Put in Prince Rupert timidly. I mean, if the wizards are soaking up magic, they must want it for something. Morwen, Cimmerian, and Mendenbar, and Telemaine all stared at each other in dismay. Yes, what are they using it for? Cimmerian said after a long, thoughtful silence. In all probability to intensify their general enchantments, Telemaine said. alternatively to enable themselves to achieve something more sustainable than would otherwise be possible. Prince Rupert looked at the magician blankly. Oh, he said in a doubtful tone. Don't mind him, Morwen said. He always gets technical when he's talking about spells. But what does he mean? The prince asked. He means that the Society of Wizards wants more magic to power their spells, Mendenbar replied, or maybe to use the spell that would be too big for them to work without it. Yes, and that's an idea that I don't care for at all, said Morwen, frowning. The Society of Wizards is too powerful already, if you ask me. You know, if the dragons start fighting with the Enchanted Forest, any new waste areas should be blamed on the war, was commented. So the Society of Wizards could absorb a considerate quantity of magic before anyone realizes what they're up to, Telemaine commented. That would explain why they're doing this, all right, Mendenbar said. We've got to stop them. Without thinking, he put the hand on the hilt of his sword. Mendenbar, said Cimmerian suddenly, didn't that wizard say something about you reversing his spell? Not Antrel, the wizard at Jack's house. And you were using the sword. Maybe it can reverse this spell too? It's worth trying, Mendenbar said. Not until we have a better idea of exactly what we're up against, Morwen said firmly. If the King of the Enchanted Forest gets killed trying to rescue the King of the Dragons from the Society of Wizards, goodness knows what would happen. Well, we can sneak in and take a look around, Telemaine agreed. Then we can formulate a plan of action. As long as it doesn't take too long, Cimmerian muttered. This isn't some kind of experiment where we can take our time and try again. If those wizards figure out someone's trying to rescue Kazul... Mendenbar tried to smile reassuringly at her. I don't see how they could. Ah, Willen, did you find the list? Good. Then let's go to the parlor and look at it. The sooner we're done, the sooner we can be on our way. So, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think they're going to do? What their plan
Kazul's going to get killed.
Who's going to get killed?
Kazul.
You think Kazul's going to get killed? What do you think, Maury?
The wizards are about to kill Kazul, but Cimmerian and Mendenbar come.
Okay, so we got Kazul dies. We have Kazul gets saved in the last minute. Any other ideas? Okay. Let's keep reading, find out. Chapter 15, in which everyone argues. Willen's list was remarkably clear and well organized. Once they found the section headed Caves and Caverns near the Mountains of Mourning, it was only a matter of a few minutes before they discovered the listing of the Cave of Stone Icicles, the only cave at the western end of the Pass of the Dragons. As Mendenbar had predicted, there was a back way into it, a tunnel that started from the bottom of the Crystal Falls and wound around under the hills and forest until it reached a crack at the rear of the cave. This doesn't look as if it will be hard at all, Cimmerian said. Let's go. Right, said Mendenbar. This shouldn't take long. I'll be back in an hour or so, Willen. Take care of everything while I'm gone. You know, refreshments and things. Wait a minute, Cimmerian said, her voice rising above startled objections from everyone else. You're not going without me. But I'm Kazul's chief cook and librarian, Cimmerian said firmly. It's my job to help rescue her. I suppose so, but all I'm going to do is sneak in and look at the wizards and then sneak out again. That's all you think you're going to do, but what if something goes wrong? Exactly, Morwen said. You should have someone with you. Several someones, in fact. I'm really good at sneaking, Crown Prince Jerillum put in eagerly, and I want to see a dragon up close. No, you don't, Mendenbar said. Morwen, are you trying to tell me you want to come along as well? No, Morwen said, looking at him sternly over the tops of her glasses. I'm telling you that I'm going to come along as well. Whether you like it or not. Kazul is my friend, and besides, I want to crack at those wretched wizards. We aren't going to do anything about the wizards until we know more about what we're up against, Mendenbar said, feeling harried. Well, then how come you wanted those buckets of soapy water? Crown Prince Jerillum demanded. Just in case, Mendenbar said. This is only to find out what the wizards are doing and how many of them there are. Which is precisely why I must accompany you, Telemaine put in. Not you too. Telemaine frowned at him. You don't seem to realize what a priceless opportunity this is, the magician said. It's entirely possible that we should be able to observe the Society of Wizards in the very act of casting their magic absorbing spells. Since they are extremely secretive about their methods, this may be the only chance that we have in studying their techniques. It isn't worth the risk, Mendenbar said. Not to you, perhaps, Telemaine told him. I, however, intend to take full advantage of these circumstances. One way or another, I'm going to get to look at those wizards. He leaned the wizard's staff against the wall and folded his arms stubbornly. Yeah, and then we can melt them, Crown Prince Durillum said enthusiastically. You are not coming with us, Mendenbar told him. But I'm real good at sneaking, Durillum said. Tell him, Uncle. He is, Prince Rupert said earnestly, and I'll keep an eye on him so he won't get in your way. Mendenbar stared at him. No, you won't, because you aren't coming with me either. I'm going to sneak into the Cave of Stone Icicles by myself. No, you're not, said everyone at once. Morrowind's two cats glanced up, then went back to washing their tails. Mendenbar got the distinct impression that the only reason they hadn't joined in the general outcry was that they thought it was beneath them to argue. It is inappropriate for the King of the Enchanted Forest to embark on a mission to the King of the Dragons without a formal escort, Willin added. You want me to take all these people along as a formal escort? Mendenbar asked incredulously. Really, Willin? Not at all, the elf replied. They are all persons of distinction, and it would not be suitable for any of them to take a position of formal escort for your majesty. Properly, only those of your subjects already in your majesty's employ would make up such a retinue. Due to your majesty's general dislike of formality, we have very few such persons available. What are you suggesting? Mendenbar asked with a sinking feeling. That I am the only person who can accompany your majesty in this capacity, said Willin. If he gets to, so do I, Crown Prince Durillum cried. Not without me, Prince Rupert said, settling his jaw. I don't know anything about this business with the dragons and wizards, but Durillum is my responsibility, until I lose him in the forest, that is. And Kazul is my responsibility, Cimmerian said. Like it or not, I'm going to get a look at those spells, Telemaine said. Those wizards have caused me a lot of trouble, one way or another, Morrowind pointed out, and I intend to cause them a bit of trouble back. It's quite necessary for your majesty's dignity to take a proper escort with you, Willin put in. Quiet, Mendenbar said. Everyone stopped talking. Willin looked utterly astonished. Durillum had a wary expression, and Prince Rupert and Telemaine both looked mildly taken aback. Morrowind's eyes gleamed approvingly behind her glasses. Cimmerian looked momentarily startled, but then she smiled. Mendenbar took a deep breath. First things first. Crown Prince Durillum? Yes? You are not coming on the expedition. You will stay here in my castle until I return. In the dungeon, just as requested. But it's not fair, Durillum said. I didn't know then that you were going to fight wizards, and the elf. Willin is one of my people and a native of the Enchanted Forest, Mendenbar said. You aren't. Don't bother arguing. You don't get a choice. I'm the king here, remember? Prince Durillum gave him a sulky nod. Prince Rupert, Mendenbar went on. You were quite right to say that your nephew needs watching. You will stay here and keep an eye on him while I'm gone. Certainly, Your Majesty, Prince Rupert said with a relieved sigh, if you say so. I'm afraid I can't bring you with me either, Willin, Mendenbar said, turning to his steward. Somebody has to take care of our visitors, you know, and you're the only possible person. Willin hesitated, plainly torn. It is my duty to serve your Majesty regardless of the danger. I appreciate your willingness to accompany me, Mendenbar assured him. I feel, however, that you would serve me better here. Now, please take these two guests to the northwest tower dungeon and see that they get some refreshments. As your Majesty commands, Willin said, bowing. He gestured to Prince Rupert and Crown Prince Durillum and led them away. Well, that takes care of them anyway, Mendenbar thought. as the three rounded a bend in the corridor and vanished from sight. The rest wouldn't be quite as easy. He looked over and saw Morwen, Cimmerian, and Telemaine standing side by side, wearing identical expressions of stubbornness, and he sighed. He supposed he could accidentally on purpose forget to include them in the transportation spell, but somehow he didn't think that would stop them. Not when one was a witch, one a magician, and one an experienced dragon's princess. Don't even bother trying to talk us out of it, Cimmerian said. You'll just waste more time. You're probably right, Mendenbar said at last. And anyway, I suspect I really should have some help with me, just in case. Very sensible of you, Morwen told him. Yes, well, let's get our buckets and go, Mendenbar said uncomfortably. The four of them collected buckets of soapy water from the imperturbable castle footman. Cimmerian and Telemaine took 2 each, but Mendenbar only took 1, because he wanted to keep one hand free in case he needed his sword. Morwen also took only 1 bucket. She did not explain, and her expression dared anyone to comment. No one did. The footman left, removing Telemaine's staff along the way. Be sure you put that somewhere safe, they called after him. Mendenbar looked around one last time, checking to make sure everyone was finally ready, then twitched the strands of power and transported them all to the foot of the Crystal Falls. They appeared on the slippery bank of a narrow stream. A little further on, the Crystal Falls poured in a shining curtain down the side of a sheer cliff of black glass. The water foamed and swirled at the foot of the falls, forming a small, restless pool, then rushed down into the channel at their feet and dashed on into the deeper parts of the enchanted forest. The noise of the falling water was tremendous, and the air had a clean, sharp smell. Mendenbar looked around to see that everyone was there, and that no one had spilled their soapy water. He noticed, without surprise, that the 2 cats had come along, even though he had not specifically included them in the transportation spell. Cats were like that. Which way is the tunnel entrance? Cimmerian asked. She had to shout to make herself heard over the roar of the waterfall. Over there! Mendenbar shouted back, waving at a clump of fir trees near the foot of the cliff. Watch your step. What did you say? Telemaine yelled. He said, watch your step, Cimmerian replied at the top of her lungs. Telemaine nodded, and they moved cautiously away from the water-slick bank of the stream. The cats had already moved out of the range of the mist, billowing up from the base of the waterfall. When the rest of the group caught up to them, the 2 cats gave Mendenbar deep looks of reproach, as if to imply that he should have had more sense than to set everyone down so close to such a damp, uncomfortable spot. The tunnel entrance was a narrow crack in the side of the cliff, hidden behind a clump of firs. The cats trotted through it and vanished into the darkness. Morwen gazed after them with a thoughtful expression on her face. I don't suppose anyone remembered to bring a light, Cimmerian said, eyeing the crack with evident misgiving. Telemaine smiled and said 3 words that crackled in the air. A small globe of golden light appeared above his head. I'll go first, so the rest of you can see where you're stepping, he said, smiling with a trace of smugness. And what do you think will happen when we get near the wizards and all their magic-absorbing spell gets hold of your little glowing ball? Morwen said. You're not thinking, Telemaine. I suppose you have a better idea. Morwen pushed her glasses firmly into place, set down her bucket of soapy water, and reached into one of her long, loose sleeves. She pulled out a small lantern and set it on the ground. Then she reached into the other sleeve, from which she pulled a flint striker and a long splinter of wood. Expertly, she struck a spark and lit the splinter, then used it to light the lantern. She blew the splinter out, stuffed it and the flint back into her sleeve, and smiled at the surprise on everyone's faces. I thought we might be needing this, she said, picking up the lantern and the bucket. She started for the mouth of the tunnel. Hang on a minute, Mendenbar said. I should go first. Would you give me the lantern, Morwen? Only if you don't dawdle, Morwen responded. My cats are in there. Of course. You come next, then, and Telemaine after you. Cimmerian can come last. That way we'll have a light between every 2 people. Cimmerian didn't look happy about these arrangements, but Mendenbar did not give anyone time to argue. As soon as Morwen nodded, He took the lantern and started into the crack. It was only wide enough for one of them at a time to edge sideways, and the ground was covered with shattered rock, which made the footing treacherous. Juggling the lantern and his bucket back and forth from hand to hand, Mendenbar tried to see what lay ahead of him, while still giving Morwen enough light to follow. Progress was slow, and he began to wonder whether the whole tunnel was going to be as narrow and difficult as the beginning. "Maybe we should have been better off charging at the main entrance," he muttered to himself. After what seemed like a very long time, but was probably only a few minutes, the tunnel widened. The piles of shattered rock became fewer, then ceased altogether. Mendenbar heaved a sigh of relief and stopped to let the others catch up.